When you first starting out stand-up and you first got paid?
Yeah, I do.
Where were you?
Like, this whole thing has been a surreal dream for me. Like, I was in Ruskin, Florida. I was a teenager, and I hadn't decided I was gonna be a comedian. And I was just with some older people, and we were going in this establishment, and I realized I'm finna get carded, and I'm not old enough to be in here.
Yeah.
And then a guy walked.
Like a bar?
It was. Yeah, Ruskin's very.
Some people are afraid to speak the truth. Others pay the price for doing it anyway. Katt Williams is one of those people. January 2024, one podcast, one man, and a set of statements that would rob half of Hollywood of a good night's sleep. Today, we are breaking down that legendary moment when Katt Williams sat across from Shannon Sharpe on the Club Shay Shay podcast and did something nobody in the entertainment industry had dared to do before. He called Kevin Hart an industry plant, on camera, without a script, without fear, without hesitation. But this story is bigger than two comedians going back and forth. This is about Hollywood's darkest secrets, the ones everyone in the industry already knew, but nobody had the courage to say out loud. If you want real, unfiltered content like this, subscribe right now, because we are just getting started. January 3rd, 2024. Shannon Sharpe's YouTube podcast, Club Shay Shay, dropped an episode that will be written into internet history. Katt Williams, comedian, actor, and the most outspoken person in Hollywood, walked into that studio without a publicist, without a PR handler, and without anyone's permission. And over the course of 3 hours, he said things that shook the entire entertainment world to its core. Early in the interview, Katt looked directly into the camera and delivered what would become one of the most quoted lines of the entire year. All these big deviants are catching hell in 2024. All lies will be exposed. That was not a throwaway line. That was a warning. And as the year unfolded, millions of people started to believe he had been right all along. The interview pulled in over 86 million views. Fans across social media wrote that Katt Williams had essentially predicted the entire cultural conversation of 2024 before it even began. But the biggest name in the crosshairs that day was Kevin Hart. Now, before we get into exactly what Katt said, you need to understand the backstory, because this tension did not begin in 2024. It had been building since at least 2018. That year, Katt Williams made public comments about comedian Tiffany Haddish. Kevin Hart, one of Haddish's closest friends and most vocal supporters in the industry, fired back during an appearance on The Breakfast Club. Hart said, "My frustration with Katt Williams comes from the fact that he keeps pointing at Hollywood and the white man, but when does he take responsibility for his own actions? You had the shot. You were the guy. And you didn't show up to work." On the surface, it sounds like a reasonable take. But here is what people needed to understand about Katt Williams. He does not forget easily. And in January 2024, 6 years later, he came prepared to settle every single score. Now let's talk about those two words that started everything: industry plant. In the entertainment world, being labeled an industry plant is one of the most damaging accusations you can make against someone. It means this: the person presents themselves as self-made, as someone who grinded from the bottom and earned every opportunity through sheer talent and hustle. But the reality is that their rise was engineered behind the scenes by powerful people with specific agendas. Less talent, more access, more control. And Katt Williams dropped this accusation on Kevin Hart without blinking. Sitting on Club Shay Shay in front of a live audience and millions of viewers worldwide, Katt said, "In 15 years in Hollywood, no one in Hollywood has a memory of going to a sold-out Kevin Hart show, there being a line for him, ever getting a standing ovation at any comedy club. He already had his deals when he got here." Read that again, slowly. Katt Williams was claiming that Kevin Hart, one of the highest-paid comedians on the planet, a man who sells out arenas worldwide, never went through the grind that every real comedian has to endure. He never built a following the hard way. He skipped the process entirely and arrived in Hollywood with deals already locked in. Then Katt went even further. Have we ever heard of a comedian that came to Los Angeles, and in his very first year in LA, he already had his own sitcom on network television and his own film called Soul Plane that he was leading? No. So, what do you think a plant is? Shannon Sharpe. a man who has sat across from professional athletes, celebrities, and some of the sharpest minds in entertainment, had almost nothing to say. He sat there, visibly stunned. But Katt Williams was far from finished. This is where the interview moved from shocking to genuinely unsettling. Katt alleged that for an entire 5-year stretch, nearly every major film that Kevin Hart starred in had first been offered to Katt Williams. In his own words, for a 5-year period, every single movie that Kevin Hart did was a movie that had been on my desk. And all I had said was, "Can we take some of this out, and then I can do it." According to Katt, the studios kept coming to him with these roles. He kept turning them down, not out of laziness or attitude, but because he refused to play certain characters the way the scripts were written. He felt the roles were demeaning, and every time he said no, those exact same roles went directly to Kevin Hart. Think about the full weight of that claim. If it is true, it means there is an operating system inside Hollywood, a shadow structure that determines who gets pushed forward and who gets held back. A system that rewards those who are cooperative and compliant, and that punishes those who ask too many questions or refuse what they are being handed. Katt said no. Kevin Hart said yes. And according to Katt, the machine rewarded that compliance with $1 billion empire. Kevin Hart did respond to the claims, and his response was notable. Not for what he said, but for what he did not say. When first asked about it, Hart said, "If that's what he fuels himself off, God bless him. Good for him. I hope he gets all that he needs and he wants, and I'm here cheering for him from afar." He did not call it a lie. He did not offer facts or a counter-narrative. He simply dismissed it with warmth and deflection. And as anyone paying close attention would notice, someone who is completely certain of their own truth does not typically respond that way. When the Club Shay Shay interview went fully viral, Hart posted on X, formerly Twitter. And his response was a textbook Hollywood deflection move. He wrote, "Gotta get that anger up out ya, champ. It's honestly sad." And then in the very same post, he promoted his upcoming Netflix film Lift, adding, "There is a moment in the trailer where someone says, 'They really love you.' I now know she's talking about Katt." Classic playbook. Dismiss the criticism, reframe the narrative, and sell your product in the same breath. The public was split right down the middle. Half of social media said Hart was handling it with grace. The other half pointed out that he never once denied anything specifically, because perhaps he simply could not. A few months after the interview exploded online, Katt Williams appeared at New York Magazine's Vulture Festival. When someone asked him point blank what his real intention had been, his answer was jaw-dropping. He said, "I was trying to do something there that hadn't been done. I thought that I had figured out the algorithm mathematically, and when I wrote it out to kill the careers of the people I was talking about." He came in with a plan. He had calculated every single move. His stated goal was to end careers. But then he said something that made the whole thing even more alarming. But it was so vicious that I erased all of the knockout blows and just left the jabs.
The whole thing was, I was myself. Somebody paid me for being me.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that.
I've been shocked ever since.
Yeah. When you're not doing comedy, I know you're playing golf. Yes, I know you love golf. But then you had to stop playing for a while because you tore both rotator cuffs. You ready for this? Doing a push-up contest. Why?
Hold on. Losing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Losing a push-up contest. Yeah.
You
not
said
doing
it like maybe I won.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just can't. No, you did not.
What 86 million people watched, the statements that shook Hollywood and flooded every social media platform, was just the warm-up. The light punches, the opening rounds, the actual knockout blows, he deleted them before he ever sat down. And Hollywood is still wondering what those blows were. The fallout did not stay on the internet either. In the months that followed, Kevin Hart's public image became visibly strained. His Hart House restaurant chain quietly shut down with no public explanation. His social media presence alongside his wife Eniku became noticeably less frequent. And despite being on a major comedy tour throughout 2024, he was unable to take that tour internationally the way he had in previous years. Then came perhaps the most revealing moment of the entire saga. Kevin Hart went on Charlamagne Tha God's podcast and admitted, publicly, that he made a mistake by ever responding to Katt Williams at all. He said, "I should have never addressed him at all. I don't have to. Like, why? What will it do for me? What will I gain? There is no gain. I look at everything from a business and economic standpoint. If I'm investing in something, what is my return? And if I can't answer that question..." He never finished the sentence, but the message landed anyway. A man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, one of the most commercially successful comedians alive, admitting publicly that he regrets ever engaging with Katt Williams. Ask yourself, why would a man with nothing to hide feel that way? You know, a story has entered the cultural bloodstream when Saturday Night Live turns it into a sketch. SNL created a full parody segment built around the controversy. A cast member portraying Katt looked into the camera and delivered the line, "Look, Hollywood made Kevin Hart. Everyone knows Kevin Hart was made in the same factory where they make Teddy Grahams." The audience roared. But here is the thing about SNL. They only mock what is already living rent-free in the public's head. The fact that Kevin Hart's Hollywood rise had become a national punchline on live television tells you exactly how deeply Katt's words had penetrated the culture. Now it is important to be clear about something. Katt Williams did not sit down with Shannon Sharpe just to take shots at one person. He was making a much larger and more serious argument. His core claim is this: Hollywood operates through a hidden system, a shadow structure, and within that structure, certain people are deliberately elevated not because they are the most gifted, but because they are the most manageable. They follow instructions. They do not challenge the machine. They do not expose what happens behind closed doors. And in exchange, they receive the deals, the movies, the press, and the cultural dominance. Katt Williams, by his own account, refused to participate in that arrangement. He said he turned down offers worth up to $50 million, not once, but multiple times, throughout his career. He placed himself alongside Dave Chappelle, who famously walked away from a massive Comedy Central deal at the absolute peak of his success rather than compromise his integrity. Both men paid a real cost for saying no, and both men kept something more valuable than money. Kevin Hart was not the only person Katt called out that day. He went after Steve Harvey, accusing him of building his career on stolen material. He accused Cedric the Entertainer of lifting his best closing joke and performing it word for years. He mentioned Ricky Smiley. He touched on the broader Hollywood machine and its connections to figures like Diddy. But the world zeroed in on Kevin Hart because Hart was the biggest name, the most visible, the most successful on paper. And so the questions Katt raised about him cut the deepest and traveled the furthest. So what is the final verdict? Was Katt Williams telling the truth? That is for each person to decide for themselves. But what cannot be denied is this. Katt Williams said, out loud and on camera, what millions of people had been quietly thinking for years. He forced open a conversation that the entertainment industry had been working very hard to keep shut. And regardless of where you land on his specific claims, the courage it takes to sit in that chair, look into that camera, and say all of that without flinching is something you simply cannot fake. Kevin Hart remains a massive star. His brand is still standing. But something in the public's relationship with him shifted after 2024. You can feel it. And based on his own words, Kevin Hart can feel it too. Katt Williams made one promise in that interview: all lies will be exposed. In 2024, a great deal was. And if Katt Williams is to be believed, we are nowhere near done. If this video made you think, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to see this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Kevin Hart is really an industry plant? Subscribe, because there is a lot more truth coming your way.